Unlike the fake Faurot Field North end zone renderings that were leaked a few months ago, these new ones are real and they are spectacular. So let's talk about that and more right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and a guy who played ball in high school. And like everybody who makes that statement, I'm going to leave it up to you to guess which sport I played. But you know what? Jayden Quaintance is a heck of a basketball player. I got an update on him coming up in a little bit, on more portal chatter, including Duke's Mark Mitchell. Lots of interesting stuff happening with Tiger basketball right now. But before we start the show, I do want to remind you that, yes, I do have a competitive side. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or on Google Play. And man, these North End Zone renderings that were released in Raleigh today, of course, of the North End Zone complex, boy, it's more ambitious than I was expecting, I have to admit. And I like it a lot, and it seems like everybody on the internet seems to like it too. Mizzou fans on the internet agreeing on everything is certainly a rare moment, but it does happen on occasion. And one of the first takeaways, well, there is a smaller Rock M at Faurot Field, but hey, at least it's still there, right? I'm surprised by the multi-decks that we have at the North End Zone facility. But again, I'm not mad at it at all because I can live without the view of University Hospital, the dorms, the Stadium Boulevard, all that good stuff. I was just expecting it to remain slightly more open air. But you know what? For the fans who are complaining that Faurot's stadium dynamic, the loudness of the students, of the capacity at Faurot Field, that the atmosphere is not quite what it used to be. Well, I think this actually increases that. Closing in the North End Zone should keep some of the sound inside of the stadium, quite honestly. And of course, also capacity is going up a little bit too under these plans. We're talking from 62,000 right now up to about 65,000. Although one of the board of curators was quick to say that it's probably not going to get any more than 65,000. And indeed, the focus is on premium seating here, which to me does make a lot of sense. You're talking about 2,000 more premium seats here, including 51 seats. You've also got a big entry plaza on the North End Zone that will, of course, be available to everyone. Really, it kind of looks like the new renderings I've seen for the Titans, the Tennessee Titans' new stadium in Nashville. For those of you who have seen that, I mean, it looks pretty incredible, to be honest. It's almost that combined with the main entrance behind home plate, I would say, at the new Busch Stadium is almost what it looks like to me. Now, of course, there's going to be a new video board on top of this whole thing, another bunker club, if you will, that's going to be underneath of the Hill complex. So that's really interesting. Premium seats on the side where the Hill used to be. So indeed, the Hill's square footage is going to be shrinking just a tiny bit. But to me, just the visual of the Rock M Hill and having however many people it's going to be in capacity over there, just keeping that landmark intact, I think it's a big win. And it's better than, frankly, my Kansas City Royals did on this latest vote with Jackson County when they put out not only was the Kansas City Chiefs portion particularly weak in terms of, hey, here's what we're going to spend $200 million on. But the Royals, to not even include the classic Crown Vision scoreboard in their rendering. Sure, you get the fountains. Hey, that's one of the things that made Kauffman Stadium special. Number two, Crown Vision made it, one of the landmarks of that stadium. To not include that was a huge miss. So the fact that Missouri was smart enough to include the Rock M, of course, not get rid of one of the great traditions in college football. Hey, that was an obvious move, but I'm still going to give them credit for it. Again, love all the glass on the outside. From the outside of the stadium looking in from Stadium Boulevard, man, this is really ambitious. But again, apparently the demand is very much there for this premium seating. And I am glad, by the way, as I've said before, I love Desiree Reed-Francois for the most part, all the things she did, especially upgrading the fan experience. And as a season ticket holder to football and basketball, I guess I was really focused on all of that. But I will say, it seemed like her idea for the North End Zone complex was more of what I've called several times, a ballpark village light. For those of you who are St. Louis Cardinals fans who have been to Busch Stadium recently, of course, the last few years, basically in left and center field, there's a whole thing called Ballpark Village. A whole bunch of restaurants, bars, all that kind of good stuff. To me, I've always said that would be a bridge too far. And while it does seem like if Desiree Reed-Francois was on that side of the argument for the North End Zone complex, well, you know what? I'm going to be on the other team for this one. I still like DRF, but she's not perfect. And speaking of which, I'll tell you why Missouri's war on cash at these stadiums is a bad idea. But that's a topic for another day. But you know what? Having said all of this, again, I don't want to crush Desiree Reed-Francois because under her leadership, according to, again, this is Callum McAndrews' words. I'll just quote him here quickly from the Columbia Tribune. Under Reed-Francois' leadership, Missouri secured at least $50 million toward the stadium renovations in a single haul. That was part of the anonymous $62 million gift. Well, $50 million of that was earmarked for these stadium upgrades. So, to me, you still have to give Desiree Reed-Francois some of her credit for making this all come together, even though it may not be her entire vision. I have to say, what was released here, I love this vision so far. We'll see how it ultimately comes together. We're talking about a $250 million project here, $250 million. For comparison's sake, well, the South End Zone complex, well, that opened up in 2019. Ultimately, the cost was just under $100 million, $98 million. But you look at the comparison here, this is definitely a more ambitious project. And considering the wild inflation we've seen in a post-COVID world here, $250 million, I guess it's just the cost of doing business these days. But the interesting thing here is it was not only the the North End Zone complex that is getting just the biggest facelift in Mizzou history, arguably, but the rest of the stadium, concessions, restrooms, improvements throughout the stadium. And that'll be a lot less in terms of dollars and cents, just improving the restrooms, for example, on the east and west sides of the stadium. But boy, will that just really improve, I think, the experience for all the people who sit over there, as I did for 35 years or something like that. Also, I will say there's going to be a year-round banquet space available to the public for rent. To me, that's a lot more realistic than having actual shops, hotels, restaurants, bars, whatever it might be over there. Again, the ballpark village light concept, to me, a banquet space that you can just rent out on off times, that's a lot more realistic and a better use of that space, in my opinion. By the way, the goal for this thing to open is 2026, which just happens to be the 100-year anniversary of the opening of Faurot Field. And damn it, 2026, I might be dead by then if insert your non-preferred presidential candidate you hate here is elected. I'm just kidding, people. But seriously, though, I just think this is all very exciting for Mizzou football, and really just shows you why 2024 is such a big year for this program. Not only is there still something to prove, why stop now? Well, clearly the entire administration, the backers of NIL, the backers of this project, they're not wanting to stop either. And as somebody who's been a huge fan of this program for decades, hey, I thank you all for it. And coming up, we got a whole bunch of basketball to talk about on the program as well, including why Jayden Quaintance may be a stronger possibility for Missouri than I may have previously believed this week. He's a hell of a talent. So let's talk about Quaintance coming up here in just a little bit. But first, I want to tell you about Yahoo Finance, which if you're an everydayer, you know I'm a big-time stock guy, and I've used Yahoo Finance for years. To me, not only one of the best places to use charts and get basic information, I'm telling you, go to Yahoo Finance, type in NVIDIA, for instance, or whatever your favorite stock might be. Scroll down just a little bit to recent news. Click on SEC filings and then periodic financial reports. And bang, just like that, you've got basically all the information you need, which is the quarterly financial reports. These companies have to tell you the truth, or I should say they have to tell the SEC the truth, not the Southeastern Conference, but the other SEC the truth, or else they have to go to jail, folks. That's the kind of information that you want. If you own a stock, you want to look through that kind of information. It's the easiest to find, to me, at Yahoo Finance. So here's the deal. For comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor like me. It's yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination. yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. And of course, the Locked On NFL mock draft is available now. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on Locked On NFL Draft to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The local Locked On NFL mock draft available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. And let's talk some more about Jayden Quaintance. And at first it seemed like, oh, well, maybe Missouri's not going to be as involved this time. But as I said on my program, when I heard that, according to Jayden Quaintance's father, that he was going to be visiting Louisville, I thought, oh, maybe the fact that we were 0-19 in the SEC last year and 8-24 overall isn't as big of a detriment as I may have thought, because Louisville was an equally bad 8-24 last year, and actually worse quite a bit significantly if you look at the advanced stats. But regardless, and again, Louisville 4 wins the previous year, whereas Missouri under Gates obviously had a much, much, much better year, 25 wins before that. So here's the deal with Quaintance, according to Rob Cassidy at Rivals.com. Quote, Missouri was a serious player in Quaintance's first recruitment and could be again this time. The Tigers seem like the biggest threat to Calipari here, as the 5-star came incredibly close to landing in Columbia when he made his original commitment. Mizzou is in touch with Quaintance and his family once again and is making a strong push. So that certainly gets me excited, although I would caution people a tiny bit. It's not as though Quaintance can't be a factor this coming season, but he is really, really young. He just turned 16 years old this past summer. So, and because of that, by the way, and this is a plus, this isn't a negative, but he's going to have to play at least 2 seasons. This is a guy who's a McDonald's All-American caliber player, despite being probably the youngest guy in that class of McDonald's All-Americans. He's a guy 6'10", just, at that size, you just don't see many guys who can move like he can, quite simply. That's probably the most impressive part of Quaintance to me. So obviously he's a guy that Missouri or any program in the country would take at this point. It's just encouraging to see on a whole bunch of levels, not just Quaintance specifically, but generally as well, that despite this absolutely horrific basketball season that we all suffered through, it doesn't seem to be hurting recruiting at this point. And by the way, some breaking news here on the Locked On Missouri podcast. I guess it's Locked On Mizzou, isn't it? I don't even know the name of my own podcast, but Austin Firestone retiring from football. He's a transfer from Northwestern last season, defensive end for Missouri. Although this isn't a gigantic blow on paper, Firestone recorded 2 tackles last season, including 1 sack against Vanderbilt, but he's deciding to move on from football, pursue other things for whatever reason. So good luck to Austin Firestone, but bigger picture for Missouri, as I've said before, you're always looking for more linemen, whether it is the offensive or defensive side of the football. This is just to that point. You can never get enough linemen, and it just shows me that Missouri will be looking for linemen in the transfer portal here. And speaking of the portal, on the basketball side, Mark Mitchell from Duke sure appears to be trending toward Missouri at this point. 24/7 has put in a future prediction for Missouri. Power Mizzou sure seems to think it's a lock over there from their perspective. So to me, Mark Mitchell, a guy who, from my sources, say a really talented kid who hasn't even hit his upside yet. He'll have 2 more years left to play at Missouri or anywhere else for that matter. So he'd be a great addition, a 6'9" forward, lots of athleticism, all that good stuff, plenty of high school pedigree. He'd be a really interesting get for Dennis Gates and Missouri, and it's certainly trending to more likely than not at this point just by reading the tea leaves. And speaking of things that are more likely than not, I've just been feeling lately that, well, in terms of this previous freshman class for Missouri, 3 guys, Anthony Robinson, Trent Pierce, and Jordan Butler, I think Anthony Robinson is pretty close to a lock to come back at this point. The other 2, Butler and Pierce, honestly, I hope I'm wrong, but it's getting hard for me to picture both of them coming back, if not one of them. Hopefully one of them comes back. It's really hard to see both of them coming back, but really I hope I'm wrong. Maybe this is just the old school nature in me of just seeing true freshman pups come onto the court at Missouri basketball over the years and see them develop into something much better. And of course, Pierce and Butler have obvious talent. The question is, to me, are Pierce and Butler willing to develop and be patient here? Because a lot of the guys that are transferring in, well, they're 1-year players. It's not as though all of these guys are going to be around forever. So are these guys willing to hang around for an entire school year and be patient and develop? That just doesn't really seem to be the way these days. And I'm not even saying I blame them if they would transfer. I'm just saying, as a fan, I genuinely do hope I'm wrong and both of those guys stick around. And as I've said before, I'm still generally a fan of Desiree Reed-Francois, but when it comes to Missouri paying her buyout, the contractual part of her buyout that she owes to Missouri, well, the idea that Arizona expects her to collect some of that, that was a non-starter for this here podcaster. Well, I'm curious what the university feels about it. Well, Moon Choi gave us a little bit of an idea, and I'm going to tell you all about what he said coming up here in just a little bit. But first, I want to tell you about Monopoly Go. And you know what? We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. You're down at halftime. It ain't looking good. You're feeling low, not sure if you can pull out that victory. Well, that's when you got to dig deep inside and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, baby, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime, with lots of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress with your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in-game tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. So when it comes to the Desiree Reed-Francois buyout, her cost of leaving her contract, breaking her contract, and leaving for Arizona, whether you think she's justified or not, we're just talking legally here. Why should Missouri pay a dime of that? That's the part that I was trying to figure out. Well, apparently Missouri President Moon Choi feels very much the same way. He said today in Raleigh he expects the terms of her buyout to be honored. Well, that's pretty simple language, isn't it? Good for Moon Choi, good for the university, and by golly, we got to pay for this $250 million complex somehow. So I'm glad we're holding tight there. And you know what? Let's talk just a little bit more to close out the show about the Jontay Porter situation. I got to say, according to the Sports Action Network, maybe this is one reason while I was saying at first, hey, let's pump the brakes and not get too hasty, accusing of Porter of stuff before he's even been, well, really publicly accused of anything. Just a lot of things looked bad, but let's not jump to conclusions. Well, some more information, again, just keeps coming out more and more here. One of the more interesting things, at least from my perspective, during the last few years here, Porter evidently operated a Discord account, which is a multi-person messaging service, a Discord account that provided stocks, crypto, and occasionally gambling advice for a monthly subscription of $49.99. Well, hey, that sounds a lot like me at times, right? Giving out advice occasionally about gambling and certainly about stocks and crypto as well. But here's the thing. There's the real argument that I would like to swat down a little bit here. Here's something I've seen from a lot of people, because as I've said, I wanted to be fair to Porter. You know, I'm a believer in innocent until proven guilty. And I felt like there were some people who were jumping to conclusions for understandable reasons. But at the same time, I felt like some of my fellow journalists maybe weren't living up to the standard, at least the standard that I have. Let's put it that way. We can all disagree or agree on that. But regardless, as I said the whole time, if Porter is indeed guilty of what he is charged of, well, he deserved to get kicked out of the league. I'll stand by that point. But there's a whole bunch of people that are pointing out what they see as hypocrisy from the NBA, because, of course, the NBA, as I've said many times, guess who's an official sports betting partner of the NBA? Yes, my friends over at FanDuel, for example. So a lot of people will say, well, if they're getting money, if the league is getting money, then why can't the players bet? That's hypocritical. That's the point they're making. But here's the thing. As Kevin Clark at The Ringer correctly points out, in my opinion, quote, the players get a ton of money from gambling in the salary cap, same as the owners. If they want to trade, they being the players, if the players want to trade that money for the ability to make $100 on college parlays, the owners would probably be happy with that trade. So to me, that point is totally well taken, and something that people, when they point out the hypocrisy thing, they don't realize, oh, wait, just like TV revenue, yes, gambling revenue that the NBA gets, essentially the players get a chunk of that as well. I don't know if it's still 47%, 50%. I don't know what the exact number is, but it's a pretty good deal for the players. I don't know how many of you get a guaranteed portion of revenue at your place of work, but I certainly don't. Okay, the overall portion that the company makes, yeah, that's not something that we get at Locked On. Don't get me wrong, I think I have a great relationship with Locked On, and that's why I'm about 908 episodes deep into this venture here. So thank you all for joining me on this venture. Thank you to all you everydayers, and thank you to the select few that have been here for all 908 episodes. I certainly appreciate each and every one of you more than you could ever possibly imagine. So until next time, until Friday, I think we'll be hearing some more real official basketball news coming up, but whatever comes up, I'll be here on Friday for you right here on Locked On Mizzou.